I expected much better service.
This restaurant has standards. Right now, you're not meeting them.
I've had enough. This is completely unacceptable.
Mock me. One more time.
Who are you?
Richard Hawthorne's voice barely rose above a whisper. Who are you? Daniel Carter didn't answer. Instead, he calmly picked up the silver serving tray, gave a polite nod, and turned towards the kitchen as though nothing unusual had happened. The entire restaurant remained silent. More than 100 wealthy guests watched the exchange, unable to understand why one of the most influential businessmen in New York had suddenly gone quiet. Even Richard himself couldn't explain it. Something about the young waiter felt strangely familiar, yet he couldn't work out why. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now, let's find out why the billionaire's confidence disappeared in an instant. Daniel returned to the dining room moments later, carrying another order to a different table. He smiled politely at an elderly couple, wished them an enjoyable evening, and continued serving the next guests with the same calm professionalism. Not once did he look back at Richard. That confused Richard even more. Most people tried to impress him. Others recognized him immediately and asked for photographs. This young waiter had done neither. It was as though Richard Hawthorne was just another customer. Richard turned towards the restaurant manager. Manager. The middle-aged man hurried over. Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. Richard kept watching Daniel. Who was that waiter? The manager hesitated for the briefest moment. His name is Daniel, sir. Richard frowned. I asked who he is. The manager forced a polite smile. He's helping us this evening. Before Richard could ask another question, another member of staff rushed over and whispered something into the manager's ear. The manager's expression changed instantly. He nodded, looked across the restaurant at Daniel, and quietly said, Please let Mr. Carter know. The board members have arrived. Richard froze. He looked back at the manager. The board members? The manager realized what he'd just said. His face drained of color. He had spoken far louder than he intended. Around the restaurant, several guests looked up in confusion. Richard's eyes narrowed. One question echoed through his mind. Why would a waiter need to meet the board of directors? Richard watched Daniel disappear through the kitchen doors. Something didn't add up. Waiters didn't attend board meetings. They certainly weren't addressed as Mr. Carter by the restaurant manager. A few moments later, the manager returned carrying a bottle of sparkling water. Richard stopped him. Tell me the truth. The manager forced a smile. I'm sorry, sir. Is there a problem with your meal? I didn't ask about the meal. Richard's voice became firmer. I asked about the waiter. The manager glanced towards the kitchen before lowering his voice. Daniel simply likes helping the team whenever we're short-staffed. Richard frowned. So he's not a waiter? Before the manager could answer, a young waitress hurried over, looking flustered. Sir, the board members have been waiting for nearly 10 minutes. The manager sighed. I know. She looked towards the kitchen. Should I tell Mr. Carter they're ready? Not yet, the manager replied. He's finishing with the guests first. Richard blinked. Finishing with the guests? He looked around the dining room. Daniel was still carrying plates from one table to another, smiling warmly, checking that every guest was comfortable and thanking people for dining with them. There wasn't the slightest sign of arrogance. No special treatment. No entourage. Just a man doing the job as though it genuinely mattered. An elderly lady suddenly reached for her walking stick. Before anyone else noticed, Daniel stepped forward. Allow me, madam. He gently picked it up, helped her to her feet, and waited until she was steady before wishing her a pleasant evening. The elderly lady smiled. Thank you, Daniel. My pleasure. Richard quietly watched the exchange. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for attention. It was simply who Daniel was. For the first time that evening, Richard began to wonder whether he'd judged the wrong man. Just then, two men in tailored suits entered the restaurant. They walked straight past the manager, past every member of staff, and stopped in front of Daniel. Without saying a word, both men greeted him with a respectful nod. Good evening, Mr. Carter. The restaurant fell silent once again. The two men waited respectfully. Neither of them spoke again. Daniel carefully placed the dessert he was carrying in front of a young couple. I hope you both enjoy your evening. The couple smiled. Thank you. Only then did Daniel turn towards the two suited men. Gentlemen, Thank you for waiting. One of them smiled politely. The board is ready whenever you are, sir. Daniel glanced around the restaurant. Give me another 5 minutes. I don't leave the dining room until every guest has been looked after. Of course, sir. The two executives stepped aside without the slightest complaint. Richard stared in disbelief. Board members. Waiting for a waiter? None of it made sense. He stood up. I'm sorry. His voice stopped Daniel in his tracks. The restaurant became silent again. Daniel turned around. Yes, sir. Richard looked at him differently now. Who exactly are you? Daniel smiled politely. I'm the person serving your table this evening. Richard shook his head. No. I mean, who are you really? Before Daniel could answer, the restaurant manager approached. Mr. Carter, the board has just informed me that our investors from London have joined the meeting. Daniel nodded. I'll be there shortly. The manager lowered his voice. Would you like me to postpone the meeting until you've changed? Daniel glanced down at his waiter's uniform and smiled. No. This uniform represents every member of our team. I'm proud to wear it. The manager smiled. I understand, sir. Richard couldn't stay silent any longer. Manager, what is going on? The manager looked towards Daniel, waiting for permission. Daniel gave a small nod. The manager turned back to Richard. Mr. Hawthorne, the gentleman you've been speaking to is Mr. Daniel Carter. He is the chief executive officer of Carter Hospitality Group, the company that owns this restaurant, and every one of our 43 luxury restaurants across the country. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Richard's face turned pale. The restaurant erupted into stunned whispers. The billionaire realized. The man he had mocked all evening wasn't just a waiter. He was the owner of the entire company. Richard felt every eye in the restaurant turn towards him. Only moments earlier, he had questioned Daniel's professionalism. Now he realized he had been speaking to the man who owned the entire Carter Hospitality Group. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Daniel remained completely composed. There wasn't the slightest trace of pride on his face. He simply thanked the two executives for waiting and handed his silver serving tray to another waiter who had just returned. I'm glad you're feeling better, Daniel said with a smile. I'm sorry I had to cover your tables. The waiter looked embarrassed. My daughter needed to see a doctor, sir. Thank you for letting me leave. Daniel gently patted him on the shoulder. Your daughter comes first. Family always comes first. The waiter nodded gratefully before returning to work. Richard watched the exchange in silence. Nothing about this man matched the picture he had created in his mind. Daniel wasn't pretending. This was simply the way he treated people. Richard slowly stepped forward. Mr. Carter, I owe you a sincere apology. Daniel looked at him calmly. For what? Richard lowered his eyes. For judging you. For speaking to you as though your uniform determined your worth. I was wrong. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. I've accepted your apology. Richard looked surprised. Just like that. Daniel nodded. Yes. But there's something I'd like you to remember. Richard listened carefully. The waiter you thought was beneath you was simply helping another member of staff. I wasn't testing you. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just doing a job that needed doing. He looked around the restaurant. No position is too small when you're responsible for everyone. If my team works hard every day, the least I can do is stand beside them when they need me. A deep silence filled the dining room. Several guests quietly lowered their heads. One gentleman slowly began to clap. Then another joined him. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted into applause. Not because Daniel was wealthy, but because they had just witnessed the kind of leader most people only read about. Richard stood there in silence. For the first time in many years, he realized success had taught him how to build businesses, but Daniel had taught him how to value people. The applause continued for several seconds. Daniel raised a hand politely. Thank you, everyone. The restaurant gradually fell silent again. He looked towards Richard. I hope you'll allow me to say one last thing. Richard nodded. Please. Daniel's voice remained calm. My father raised me on one simple lesson. He used to say, if your title is the only reason people respect you, then you've earned the wrong kind of respect. I've never forgotten those words. Richard slowly lowered his head. I think I have. Daniel smiled gently. Then today wasn't a bad day after all. Richard looked at him, puzzled. Daniel continued. You didn't discover who I was. You discovered who you had become. Those words struck Richard more deeply than any public embarrassment ever could. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Richard extended his hand. Mr. Carter, I'd like another opportunity. Not to impress the CEO, but to apologize properly to the man. Daniel looked at the outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it warmly. I'd like that. A genuine smile finally appeared on Richard's face. Not the smile of a billionaire, but the smile of a man who had learned an important lesson. Daniel glanced around the restaurant. Every member of staff had stopped to watch. He smiled at them. All right, everyone, let's get back to work. The staff laughed softly and returned to serving the guests. Within minutes, the restaurant was filled with conversation once again. It was as though nothing had happened. But everyone in that room knew. They had witnessed something they would never forget. Because that evening wasn't remembered for the expensive food, or the famous billionaire who came for dinner. It was remembered for the humble CEO who proved that true leadership isn't about the title you hold. It's about the people you're willing to stand beside. If this story reminded you that kindness and respect should never depend on someone's job or title, we'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Richard Hawthorne's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single comment, and we'd genuinely love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories filled with powerful twists and unforgettable endings. Until next time, thank you for watching.